Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Unvarnished Football. I'm Michael Jackson of the Game Before the Money. With me, as always, former NFL executive Upton Bell. Now, we've been gone for a couple of weeks. We've been gone on vacation. I was in Colorado, and Upton was in Cape Cod. But we're back, and we're ready to talk some more football. And football today means gambling in a lot of scenarios. We've got Brendan Sorsby. We're going to talk a little bit more about that situation because the NFL not holding the supplemental draft after Sorsby declared himself eligible. Upton, what are your thoughts on that, and what do you see going on there?
How cynical can I be that the NFL called off the supplemental draft because they were faced with a guy that gambled, I think, 45 different times on college games, he claims, only on his team, Indiana, but I don't believe that either. But that is very unusual for a league that is deep into gambling, like the other three major sports, total four, that have gotten into bed with gambling to make themselves a hell of a lot more money, and they pull a supplemental draft because some guy from college, and I'll get into the college thing later, because Sorsby declared for the draft when he saw life was not going to be good at Texas Tech, and they all of a sudden, the NFL decides we're not going to have the supplemental draft, pointing out basically to everybody that we're not going to bring this guy into the league who has a gambling problem. What the hell were they doing lately? All they do is push it.
Yeah, I mean, every single commercial break, it seems, during NFL, during Major League Baseball, during college football, we're getting gambling commercials. Every single sports center, we're getting betting lines. Every time I go online to check scores, I get betting lines when I'm checking the schedule. We're getting this as fans, we're getting this fed to us constantly. And like I said a couple of years ago, you've got the next generation of players getting the same messaging. So when they were kids, they were getting this constant betting, gambling information mixed in with their sports news, and now they're the ones playing the games. It doesn't surprise me at all that somebody like Brendan Sorsby doing gambling on the side. I think this is the first, and I don't think he's the only. If you look back to our last podcast, I gave some statistics from an NCAA study, their own study on players gambling, football players gambling on college football. He's not the only one doing it. He's the first that got caught doing it.
Well, not only that, forget the NFL for a minute and professional sports. What about the colleges? Where the hell's Charlie Baker, our former governor from Massachusetts? Where is he on all of this? The college, the NCAA came out against Sorsby and the decision by the judge to let him play at Texas Tech. But yet, as you point out, they take gambling ads and put them out there, and yet they're then claiming, oh my gosh, we're totally against Sorsby playing this year because he gambled. You tell me, where the hell is the cynicism here about college sports? I mean, the NFL, we understand, and the four major professional sports, what they did in getting in bed with it. But if the colleges are supposed to be above and beyond this, my God, pox on them.
And college sports used to be amateur sports. It's no longer that way. So there's a lot more money. Hey, if I were 21 years old, I had a lot of money, or 20 years old, I got a lot of disposable cash. I'm gonna do some things that I wouldn't do at my age, and gambling a lot of money is one of them. And I probably would have been right there with them, betting on games. I don't really blame the players as much as the institutions and the environment that's been created and the culture that's been created around sports. Now, your dad in 1946 uh, was faced with a gambling scandal, so to speak, before the 1946 NFL championship game. Can you kind of talk about what his response was and how it differed from what's going on today?
Well, I really believe that he saved the NFL because that day I happened to be at home and always at home. My father was constantly on the telephone, whether he was at work or at home, but particularly at home. And I remember the call that came in from the district attorney's office in New York saying, "Mr. Bell, I know you're not due in till tomorrow, but you need to get in here immediately because we have a report that Frank Filchak, the quarterback, and Merrill Hapes, one of the running backs of New York Giants, were offered a bribe to throw the championship game. And even though they didn't accept the bribe, they did not report it. And now we've got a major gambling scandal. My father got on the train, went to New York. They met all night long. They called in the two players. My father agreed to let Frank Filchak, the quarterback for the New York Giants, play the game. He suspended Hapes for life, and then after the game, he suspended Filchak for life also. They end up playing in the Canadian League. But he immediately went to the papers at that time when newspapers were really powerful, unlike today, and announced his what he was doing, put it right out in the open. And from that day forward till the very end of his life, he would preach to players, whether it was a training camp, he preached to the owners, he would preach to everybody, including the media, who he was very close to, that he said, "I will never accept this. The worst thing for a player or for the National Football League is gambling." And I don't care what they say about it today. You could say Bert Bell was old-fashioned, but he always constantly warned about the gambling problem. And look what we have today. Even forget the NFL. How about the NBA? I mean, you even have coaches that were involved in huge gambling scandals for millions of dollars. And people just go, well, that's the way it is. But sooner or later, you're going to have in the NFL, we've already seen it in college, you're going to have in the NFL a situation where a guy that maybe is making a lot of money, that wants to make more, has a cousin go place a bet for him. But that's going to happen sooner or later. And what are we stuck with now? We're stuck with the cynical places, whether it's ESPN, you name them, the Red Zone, all of them are now promoted by gambling, but yet right back to the very message that college sports were the ones that really started this whole thing.
And your dad went and he hired former FBI agents to make sure that the game was clean. I spoke with Nolan Loon. I interviewed him. He was the last living player from the Curly Lambeau Packers that I could find. One of two that I could find while I was doing the game before the money. And he said that he was walking to the game against the Bears. He was walking to Lambeau Field. This is in the late 1940s. So transportation was different. No player parking lots. In fact, the Packers were still playing in a high school football stadium. But he got kind of hit by a car. And when I say kind of hit, he didn't get run over by a car, but a car ran into him. Not at a high speed. But it turned out the car was from Chicago, and they were playing the Bears. And there was actually, Nolan said there was an FBI agent who discussed the matter and looked into it. Now, my guess is that was a former FBI agent that your father had hired to ensure that there weren't gambling problems in the league or that things were being done to fix games. I'm not saying that anything is happening now, but I
How do you
haven't
know?
heard of anything in place in any of the sports.
Well, I can tell you this. My father immediately that week called Davy O'Brien, his former quarterback at the Philadelphia Eagles, who had left at the prime of his career, the Eagles, to join the FBI, and went on to become the best pistol shot for the FBI in America. He called Davy O'Brien and said, "Can you talk to J. Edgar Hoover, the head of the FBI? I would like to hire ex-FBI agents to be in every city and be involved. And there were accusations that they actually followed players into bars and different things. But that's the way it had to be policed at that time. And I can remember my father going to the different training camps, and I would go with him, myself and my brother, and him telling the players there are two ways to get thrown out of the NFL. He said first is gambling, and the second is women, and women outside of, he was talking about their marriage, and the problems that ensued. But he constantly harped upon this, and ironically, his son, me, playing at LaSalle College basketball, sitting or getting ready to go into the game between LaSalle and it might have been St. Joe's or one of those colleges, and this guy comes running from the stands and is berating one of our players, Eddie Bowler. And I asked in the locker room at halftime, I said, "What was that all about?" And they said, "Well, it was his father who's very critical of the way he plays." Well, as it turns out, it wasn't his father. It wasn't his father. It was a gambler who was berating him because he wasn't shaving points enough. And so I ended up playing with a picture. I remember telling my father, and my father just said, you've got to be careful of everything that you really do, and particularly if you're an athlete, whether it's college or the pros. Back to the college and what's going on with the NCAA. I eventually played against three, I didn't know at the time, three fixers for St. Joe's College who were, I believe, banned for a lifetime. St. Joe's that year, I think it was 1960, actually lost to Ohio State and then won third place in the consolation game, and their whole victory had to be erased because the three players, Kempton, Egan, and Majewski, who I knew, three of them, were banned for life. So I saw the results of, even in college, and this relates to today and what we're talking about. I saw this was 60 plus years ago that this was going on. So with today, with everybody, being able to bet on anything, and every TV show, I'm looking right now while we're talking at a local big radio and TV talk show, and all it has up there is bet MGM Grand, bet this, bet that. It's right up on the screen, right over where they're talking, and I'm saying, what? I mean, have we lost our mind here?
Well, that brings up a great point, because back years ago, and really not that long ago, to gamble on sports, you either had to be in Nevada, or you were or you'd have a bookie. You're dealing with someone who was let's just say it politely, skirting the law, perhaps.
Yeah.
And now gambling is so accessible. We could download an app on our phone right now and start gambling. And that's true for us. That's true for Division 1 football players. That's true for Division 1 student athletes. And again, I encourage you to look at the NCAA's report on gambling. And that we discussed in our last podcast. Gambling is so accessible now, and the kids who are playing the game now, we're in the first generation, the first wave of kids who grew up with gambling being, one, accessible, and two, so heavily promoted to them while they're watching sports growing up. And
Well, Michael, you're absolutely right, because it's part of their DNA now. I mean, you can talk, you can walk down. I walk down the street. I walk a couple hours every day. Talk to a lot of people. People stop me and they ask about gambling, this or that. But you talk to there's a playground not far from here, where there are a lot of kids that go over. By kids, I'm talking about 14, 15, 16 years old. They're always talking about gambling. I mean, it's inculcated within that group of people, and they're almost, I won't say taught, but they pick it up at a very young age, and they just think that's part of the deal now.
it's going to be.
And college,
Yeah, go ahead.
go ahead.
Yeah.
No, and college sports, they have it. They not only pay players millions of dollars, and by the way, one of the bills before Congress states that the NCAA and the transfer portal, you can only transfer once, at the most twice. Because now what they're doing, not only are guys playing to 20, 25, 26, but they can transfer 2 or 3 or 4. They can transfer as many times as they want. I mean, so again, that's another form of going to the highest bidder.
Yeah, and that's a whole nother case in itself. And college football having huge problems figuring that out as well. The LSU quarterback, Leavitt, which is a coincidental name to have after he left ASU to play for LSU. He's making $5 to $6 million reportedly. $5 to $6 million for a college quarterback, and the price is going to go up and up and up and up. Now, as I keep bringing to people's attention, these schools, and I'm not going to single out Louisiana State here, but they're just the topic of discussion because of their quarterback. That's a publicly funded institution by taxpayer dollars. And where I live, University of Texas, Texas A&M, Texas Tech, publicly funded institutions. Okay, Brendan Sorsby was set to make $4 million, I think, to play quarterback at Texas Tech. Publicly funded university. I don't want my taxpayer dollars to go to a kid playing college football. I want my taxpayer dollars to go towards education. I want my taxpayer dollars to go towards research on cancer and Alzheimer's and things of that nature. And in the case of Texas Tech, agricultural studies. The money that these schools are making and paying out is unbelievable, and they're publicly funded institutions. I'm sure they'll say like, oh, well, no public money is going towards paying these football players. It doesn't matter. The fact is that you're getting public money and you can afford to operate without it if you're paying college football players and college basketball players that kind of money.
Well, not only that is let's strip off this whole idea of getting an education because these guys don't go to class. I mean, they are professional football players playing in college, but they are pros. They're being paid millions of dollars. Uh, they they don't need to graduate. Who the hell cares whether they graduate or not? So I mean, and this was again started a long time ago, of where different schools, you know, if you're a great football or basketball player or very good, you got a tutor, and even though people would look askance on it, you know this tutor would help you at least pass enough to remain eligible. Now they don't care about that. This is a full-time pro player who can jump from place to place to place. I mean, they're the NFL years ago when players first became, you know, had a chance to become free agents. Now every college player is a free agent. That's why I'm hoping this one of the points of this bill, if it ever gets passed, is you can't keep jumping from place to place. And they have to do something of putting a ceiling on how much you're paying these people. Somebody told me that there's a player, an offensive lineman that was recruited by Michigan that's getting 10 million a year. 10 million.
That's unbelievable. And it brings us back to the old Hugh McElhenney joke about him taking a pay cut to go pro. I mean, that's an example of a guy who might take a pay cut to play in the NFL.
Well, Sorsby, Michael, Sorsby, do you think that in a supplemental draft anybody was going to offer Sorsby $4 million a year to play, which is what he would have gotten at Texas Tech? You think, with all of the problems he had, do you think somebody in a supplemental draft, one of the teams, is going to pay him starting out, guaranteeing him $4 million a year? I don't think so.
And that kind of tells us the mess of college football. And we haven't even started discussing the college football playoff at all and what a
Oh,
mess that's become and is going to continue to be. So the money, the association with gambling, these are huge problems. And then the playoff that we always wanted, it got corrupted by money as well. This isn't the Division Two playoffs. This isn't the Division Three playoffs. It's not run like that. And I want to point out to our listeners, and I have a good friend named Glenn who really pointed it out to me years ago. College football playoff, you don't see the NCAA logo anywhere around the college football playoff. That's because the NCAA doesn't run it. They run the college basketball tournament. They run the Division II tournament. They run the Division III tournament. They run every college playoff except for the college football playoff. That's one of the issues too, is there's a completely different set of rules around this college football playoff, and it's a huge income generator for the conferences. That's not what we wanted. What we wanted was to know in 1997 if Michigan or Nebraska would win. Two undefeated teams. That's what we wanted to know. And then once we got the BCS to settle things, sometimes there were three undefeated teams. And one of those undefeated teams would get shut out of the BCS championship game. That's all we wanted as fans. Now we're getting teams with 2 and 3 losses getting into the playoffs. And that's not what we wanted as fans. Some people might
they don't care. They because everything now too is geared towards television. You know, the live gate, that's fine. You can say Michigan, Ohio State, 100,000 people are in East Lansing. You can say whatever, not East Lansing, but
Ann
you can
Arbor.
say
Yeah.
Ann Arbor. You can say whatever you want about it, but everything, pre-game, post-game show, all of it. What's the first thing you hear? Well, who's favored today? I mean, even these bets on whether a guy will throw the ball 8 or 10 times. I mean, we've seen what's happened in baseball with all of these bets. In fact, today I got not a text, but a comment on my social media platform from a guy who said, I am sick of all of it. I don't want to turn on the television and see every time what ESPN has in the odds or the single bets or the stuff like that. When will this all end? It's never ending. As long, what's the famous line from Wall Street by Michael Douglas? Greed is good. And that's where we are now.
And where we're at now, as you bring up the four-letter network, as a local Austin radio personality likes to call it, the four-letter network, and everyone else reporting on sports, it's been reduced to A, gossip, and B, gambling. That's the majority of what you're getting. And that's frustrating for us real fans. That is why Upton and I have created Unvarnished Football, because we want to discuss things that are really happening on the field from a knowledgeable fan's perspective. That has gotten lost in sports coverage. I think especially over the past 5 years, it's really been diminished.
Well, get ready. It's only get worse. So that's where we are today.
So speaking of that, let's just talk football for a minute. We got training camps coming up. We've got, we'll have college players reporting for their practices here soon. Upton, tell us what it was like in the NFL coming into camps, and also what was it like early in the college? When did you, as a scout, start really focusing on the college football season? Was it at the beginning of the year that you were covering it still, or did you wait until later in the season?
No, I started my first year was 1964 when I was with the Colts. I was the assistant to the personnel director, and the first thing they did is they sent me out, and I would leave in January and maybe come back by May, get in my car and start driving, and drive my way across the South into Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and head out to the West Coast. I mean, later on, I flew it, but I stopped in every place. And I remember my first stop was Louisiana Tech. And I remember the head coach, Joe I.A., I looked so young, he said to me, are you a scout or are you a PR guy here at the college? I said, no, coach. I'm a scout for the Baltimore Colts. My name is Upton Bell. He looked at me like, are you kidding me? I mean, when I was 23 or 24, I looked like I was 16. And so he then told me about a future quarterback that he thought was going to be good someday. And he said, you might want to go over to the gym and watch him play basketball. He said he likes to shoot a lot. And that quarterback was Terry Bradshaw.
Oh, wow.
And I can remember going back a year or two after that and then saying, this guy can throw the ball harder than anybody I've ever seen. and he's such a great athlete. And I remember telling Chuck Noll after he left the Colts, where he and I became really friendly, went to the Steelers, and it was their first draft. And I said to Chuck Noll, I've never seen a quarterback more talented. Now, this is at the time, more talented than Terry Bradshaw. So that was my my first trip in '64. The, my second stop was the immortal Eddie Robinson, head coach of Grambling. And when after leaving there, I said that the whole Colts draft could be just at Grambling. They had so many great prospects, and he was so great to me. And through the years, I kept going back there. But anyway, that was the start in 1964. Now, the first training camp that I ever attended was when I was 9 years old, and it was the Bears training camp in 1946. And of course, teams came to training camp, unlike today, much earlier. I mean, the season was shorter, there were less games, and they would start earlier. And of course, today you don't start till almost August, and then start the season second week in September. Then they started early, and I remember that training camp. Sid Luckman, Hall of Fame. Ed Sprinkle, Hall of Fame. Bulldog Turner, Hall of Fame. George McAfee, Hall of Fame. Later on, became an official. That was my first training camp with the immortal monsters of the Midway, and I stayed there for 2 weeks. And it was. I still remember to this day. It was a thrill of my life to be with players. Being a kid of a former owner, now commissioner, and the Eagles, going to the Eagles training camps. But I could hardly remember that because I was only 4 or 5 years old. So what do I remember about that? But it was a completely different thing. And then a year later, going to the Cardinals training camp, and who came in? The first guy I met that day was Charlie Trippi, who eventually went to the Hall of Fame. And that great backfield of Charlie Trippi, Elmer Angsman, Pat Harder, and the quarterback was Paul Christman.
Pitching Paul Christman.
Pitching Paul, who ended up, of course, doing the AFL games, the early games, with Christman and Al Dero, as they say, Dero got us. So those memories about those early training camps and what they were like compared to today gives me a kind of a window into what it was like then and what is it like now. The difference is the players are bigger, quicker, faster, stronger. I'm not so sure more intelligent, although the game has changed mentally too, to a degree, but it gives me a perspective on what it was like and the ability to compare it to what I see today.
Now, we're about to enter a time when the NFL players are going to start returning to mini camp and camp. What is the number one thing that you think fans should be looking for their team as we enter July and practices are going to start?
The biggest thing is injuries. How many? Even though they limit the scrimmages now. I mean, when I first went to training camps, and then later on with the Colts, and then finally with the Patriots, you didn't go to you went to training camp much earlier, but there were less injuries, even though there were more scrimmages, because the players weren't quite as big and quick and as strong as they are today. Now, in the case of today, what the fans have to be looking for are the injuries. How many guys get hurt, even though they limit how many scrimmages and how many two-a-days and stuff like that you can really do. But the athletes are so finely tuned because unlike them, athletes eventually, players, work themselves into shape They came to training camp not quite in shape, football shape, but again, you played 6 preseason games. So slowly but surely, you got acclimated not only to the heat, but your body got acclimated to the pounding it would take during the season. So then you played yourself kind of into shape. Now, with all these year round training programs and all of these mini camps that they have, that I think I understand that intellectually you've got to teach them because there's so much more complexities to the football game and now to the NFL, let's say, that you need to bring them in. But but how many times you bring them in twice before you even get to training camp? Plus, many of the players now work work out year round, so I think that they're too finely tuned, and they have to face a 17 game schedule that eventually will become an 18 game schedule. They have to play on Thursdays, which doesn't give the body much time to rest. So there are a lot of negative factors that I see where a player really can get hurt even with less scrimmage by going to training camp and having their bodies, not quite adjust to the quickness and speed that they normally would have.
And a serious injury to your team on one of your starting players during training camp, that can derail your entire season.
Well, the other thing that you're seeing now are they're limiting it to 3 preseason games. Eventually, it'll be 2, maybe eventually none. But you have these now, which are really the real games, are these joint practices. Like, let's say the Patriots and the Eagles agree, which they will do once this year, I think, maybe even twice. They'll be doing joint practices with the Eagles. And so they'll be scrimmaging within those joint practices. I consider them more important than what they have now. They don't want to call it exhibition games, but they are. But they're But in the preseason, if I would tell the fans, if you can, go to the joint practices, assuming that they're open, because you'll learn more in the joint practices with other teams than you will in any preseason games. Preseason games are just to screw the ticket holders because they have to buy the full package. You go to that, you sit there, probably in the heat, and how much you really going to learn? I don't think a lot.
All right, Upton. Well, great show. Great getting back to you and getting back to Unvarnished Football. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We'll be back at you next Thursday. We'll be back on our regular schedule. Have a great 4th of July, everybody, celebrating America's 250th birthday.